All right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Dana Slowinski, and I am co-owner of Family Recovery Centers. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We're very excited to have Paula back for her third time with us. First, I'm just going to take a minute to give everyone a brief overview of Family Recovery Centers for those of you that are not familiar. We are an adolescent intensive outpatient program, evening intensive outpatient program, and we have locations in Lake Bluff, Hoffman Estates, and St. Charles, and with a fourth location actually opening late this summer. So details to come on that. We work with a wide range of adolescents struggling with maladaptive behaviors, from self-injury, suicidal ideation, substance use, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, a wide range. Two of the program highlights that I like to share are our parent involvement. So parents are actually on site with their kids 2 of the 4 evenings that they are with us. And so they are not only learning the skills right along with their child, but they're also doing their own work. So we can really wrap around that whole family system and make change within the environment and within the system. And then we also have a 24/7 on-call. So staff is available to both parents and the kids, the patients, 24/7. So we can help skills coach in their own environments, whether that's, walking into school, getting out of bed in the morning, to weekends, middle of the night. We're there to really help skills coach them through. And so that is a very, very brief overview. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have about Family Recovery Centers. Feel free to email myself or Ryan Bright, who's the other co-owner of the recovery centers. So just a couple of logistical things that do come up. So after the presentation, you will be receiving an email with the instructions to obtain your CEUs. And then also you will be receiving a copy of the PowerPoint. So you will all have that in your email following the presentation. It will also be on our website. So we will put in the chat section, we'll put our website down there so you can access it at any time there as well. Trying to think if there's anything else logistically. Question and answer. So we do have a very large audience this morning. Awesome. We're so excited to have you all with us. So we are going to do our best, and Paula is going to do her best to answer all Q&A that comes in. And if we aren't able to get to them, please feel free. You've got Paula's contact info on the slides. You've also got our contact info. So please feel free to reach out afterwards, and we will point you in the right direction, answer any questions that come our way as well. So with that, I would love to introduce Paula Merucci. As I always say in these webinars, she wears so many hats, and we are so excited to welcome her back again. So she is an EMDR approved consultant and an EMDR certified therapist. She's a national trainer for EMDR Consulting, LLC. She's a speaker and facilitator for advanced training, introduction to structural dissociation, ego state therapy, and EMDR therapy. She's a workshop provider on trauma and dissociation, and a wonderful, wonderful therapist, and just human in general. So with that, Paula, I will turn it over to you.
Oh, you guys, you added that last one. I must have done something. So I'm a good human. That's cute. That'll be appropriate for what we're talking about today. So just to kind of remind everybody, once again, for some reason, I don't get to see all of you. So if I don't see a hand, I'm going to leave it up to Ryan and company to take care of the Q&A and the chat. But as far as the slideshow goes, I'm all over that since I made it. So I love this first slide because of the picture up in the left. So Polyvagal, I went to a conference many years ago when we used to go to conferences out in California. It was an amazing conference. I want to say it was maybe 2018. And I went to it. I put some time. It's really important what you pick to go here because there's so many great speakers. So I picked the best speaker on Polyvagal, and I was so excited. I was in the front row, ready to go with my notes, had my coffee because I drank coffee back then, my water. And I was so disappointed. And I was like, this can't be what what is it that everybody's so excited about? I don't understand. And that was one of the worst presentations I've ever gone to. So I bought the book that everybody talks about, which I'm holding there in my hand. And I made the decision then, I am going to come back to this conference and I'm going to present on polyvagal, because I just know that it's special and that it needs our attention and it needs us to honor what it is. And so that is what this is all about. So this picture is kind of like the, yay, this is what I'm going to do. And now here I am and doing it. And then for any of you that are EMDR therapists, there just happens to be a picture of Ed DeJean in the background there. We were all sitting out by the pool and he was behind me. And so I thought that was kind of funny that he was in one of my pictures. I'm not going to tell you if I did that on purpose or not. Anyway, okay. So this is me. We've gone through this. This is actually my 4th time presenting, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But yes, I wear many hats. I do many things. And really the way that works is I'm a problem solver. I was an engineer when I was a freshman in college. I'm all about like, okay, well, if this isn't working, we got to figure out what is going to work. And so through being a substance abuse counselor is how I started. Running into trauma, now running into issues with dissociation, now running into issues with our clients being able to stabilize. It's just the path that I'm on. So all these things that I do is just part of that bigger path. And then there's always my own story. One of the reasons why I'm passionate about teaching is because I had learning disabilities growing up, undiagnosed. It was a big nightmare for me. I have AD, I don't have ADHD, we're not going there. I have dyslexia. So if you see misspellings, just know that, they're there because I didn't see them. But also my style is a style that hopefully you can sit back and listen and learn, as opposed to having to read. And I'm not a slide reader. There will be some slides that have specific writing on them, but for the most part, I will be telling you more a story about polyvagal. Of course, I've got to throw out there some of the things that I do in the area. I named my company as EMDR Chicago because at the time, the model that I teach was not here in Chicago, and I wanted to bring it to Chicago. And so I decided I'll name my company EMDR Chicago. So we're doing great and the trainings are wonderful. And this is just an example of some of the trainings I do locally. I don't like to travel as much anymore since COVID. So I do my trainings locally. And then I also do them virtually. And that's the gift of the pandemic, is that we can now train, we can do EMDR therapy online. The people that I've met, we did a regional meeting. We had people from all over the world. So it's really opened up our borders to anyone who is interested in working with clients that are traumatized, which is pretty easy to do across the world. And then this is just I'm really proud of this. This is one of my more recent jobs, being asked to join Farnsworth Lobenstein. He's been around for a long time. He hangs out with like the big guys. And so I am learning a lot from him. And this is basically where I come from, a dissociation background and more of a complex trauma background. So the teaching style here, you've seen this before. If you've done one of my PowerPoints, it's on every single one of my PowerPoints. It's a hear it, see it, do it approach. We're not going to be able to, well, actually, that's not true. We are going to be doing it today. We're going to do a little bit of it, but in the majority of what I do, and I did like a 3.5-hour presentation for EMDR therapists this last Sunday, where we had live demos of some of the tools that have been actually taught here. So it's important to not only hear it and to empower everybody with the knowledge, but as we look at the evidence-based research, it's important to also discuss it. It's important to practice it. So that's where the practicums come in. I won't work at a training. This is a webinar, but I won't work at a training unless it has a practicum, because if you're not doing it, then you're going to walk out of there with all this information and not really know what to do next. And integrating it into your clinical practice can be the hardest part. And then, of course, because I want to be a perfectionist, I'm teaching it so I can get to that highest level for myself. But I only do that so I can share it with you guys. And then we go out and do it. We go out and we change the world one person at a time. It's an exhausting time right now. So any tool that's going to be helpful is going to be a tool that I'm going to want to bring to those therapists out there that are doing the best that they can. So the first handful of slides are pretty boring. There's just some language on them. I usually like more color, but these are the presentations I've done for the Family Recovery Center. And one of the things I want to point out, I always talk about how my relationship with Ryan goes way back and how she was very instrumental with my family, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to do that this time, because this time I'm going to talk about my relationship with the center, in that they have invited me to speak on these topics. And when I came in and talked about EMDR therapy, really what I was coming in and talking about was an orientation that I had come across that was trauma informed. So it really doesn't matter what orientation you use. It's just about being trauma informed. And a lot of times when I do the what is EMDR, the first half of it is about becoming trauma informed. Who's Pierre Genet? How long has trauma been around? You know, we got the PTSD diagnosis in 1985. What did that mean for therapists? How has the DSMs changed throughout time? And how has the PTSD diagnosis shifted? And what kind of therapies are available? And so talking about EMDR basically brought us to, okay, we have this is one of many tools we can use with our traumatized clients. Then when the pandemic came and lingered and lingered and lingered, we started to see a lot of dissociation with our clients. First of all, the majority of our clients are probably going to have experienced at least a PTSD, frozen one-time criterion A trauma, or complex trauma, which is isolated trauma throughout childhood. And so dissociation is a coping strategy, and it started showing up everywhere. All of my consultation calls where we need to talk about dissociation. Is my client dissociating? I don't know what to do with my client dissociating. Can I do EMDR if my client is dissociating? We can't do anything with our client when they are dissociating. We can't do CBT, DBT, somatic experiencing. We can't do EMDR. We can't do motivational interviewing. We can't do 12-step work. If the client is dissociative, they are not with you. They are not here with you, present. And the cornerstone of our work is about dual attention. And it's also about attachment repair. And attachment repair means that I am in relationship with you right now. And dissociation is I just left and went somewhere else. So we did a dissociation part 1, and we gave everybody tools. You don't even have to be a trauma therapist. We gave everybody tools, the DES, on how to measure dissociation. And the beauty of the tool is that as you use it, you automatically learn about dissociation because of the way that it's set up and how it's color coded. And then asked to come back and do dissociation part 2, because, hey, yay, now we're learning something about dissociation. What do we do about it? Well, we did a part 2, and the part 2 talked about the window of tolerance, being in that window of tolerance, how to keep that client in that window of tolerance, how to maintain dual attention, how to have the client present and in the past together with the therapist, where you get the attunement and the attachment rupture. You get some repair there. And also we're working on the client's ability to state shift. So then we end dissociation part 2, and you're thinking, well, what happens if my client can't state shift? Well, that's where polyvagal comes in. And we're going to be needing to know this more and more, because our clients are struggling with state shift. Dissociation is becoming more and more prevalent in our therapy office, and the client is not able to shift out of it. And so it's important for us to go in and learn the science behind state shift, so that then we can assist our client with the tools that they need to join us in dual attention, so that then we can get back to what we eventually wanted to do, which is where we started, the orientation that we're going to use with our clients. So just a little bit about Dr. Seth Porges. He's the originator of the Polyvagal Theory. And that we call it the science of connection, the science of safety and connection. And basically it was his vagal tone. He was measuring vagal tone. And the way that you measure vagal tone is through heart rate variability. And so his goal was to, in like simple language, his goal was to measure the resilience of one client versus the next, according to how watching their heart rate variability, according to if they had a traumatic past or a good enough childhood. And so he would have two clients, and he would have them around their resting rate. It's a co-regulation that's around 70 beats per minute. And what he would do is he would trigger the two clients, and he would have them go into their, what you're going to learn is the sympathetic nervous system, hyperarousal, where their heart rate went up to about above 100, around 110 beats per minute. And then he measured as the client came back to the resting rate. And as you can imagine, the client that had the good enough childhood got back to their resting rate faster than the client that had the traumatic past, because the client's hypervigilant and that client's fight, flight, freeze response is activated. And so it takes a lot longer to get that cortisol and that adrenaline out of the system. It could take up to 20 minutes for a client to regulate. But the interesting thing is that the client's heart rate kept going. So here you have the traumatized client, and it's going, and it went below resting rate, and it went down to as low as like 50 beats per minute. And Stephen was like, what the heck? What was that? And voila, that is where polyvagal came from, the polyvagal theory, because we've always honored about two branches. We've got fight, flight, freeze, and then we have, being in your window of tolerance, being regulated. But now there's this third state, and this third state is really helping us understand our clients a lot more. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I throw this quote from Darwin in here just to make a point. I'm going to read it. Probably won't make much sense to you, but I'll tell you why in a minute. When the heart is affected, it reacts on the brain. And the state of the brain again reacts through the vagus nerve on the heart. So that under any excitement, there will be much mutual action and reaction between these two, the two most important organs of the body. So I put this in here so we can make a point. We spend so much time understanding the brain. We have Daniel Siegel, we have Alan Shore, we talk about the left brain, we talk about the right brain, we talk about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. We drive neuroscientists mad with our language. They think we're crazy. It's not really a left and a right brain, but it works for teaching. We talk about activating the corpus callosum so that you get the right brain engaged when you're doing therapy, because we want to engage the body and that the body is connected to the right brain. It's the brain, it's the brain, it's the brain, it's the brain. Well, what we're going to talk about today is about the heart. So we need to shift our expectations and our perspective, because what I find with polyvagal is that it's so different than what we've been doing that it takes a while for people to kind of soften up to what it is that we're talking about. So I want you to go into this presentation with just a clean slate and think about, we're going to be talking about organs in our body. Okay, we've got this down to some extent. And yes, there's language that we could pull out if we needed to, because there is a lot going on in the brain. I'm not saying there's not, but the focus today is on the heart and the heart rate variability, which is the vagal tone, which is the name of this, the polyvagal theory. The polyvagal theory views the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic being that it before polyvagal theory, we had two distinct branches. But what the polyvagal theory did was showed us that third option, which was when the heart rate dropped below resting rate. So we have the ventral vagal system, which supports social engagement. And then we have the dorsal vagal system, which is basically when our client goes into an immobilized shutdown. We're going to be talking about this at length. But just to have a little bit of history, the theory was introduced by Seth Porges in his presidential address to the Society of Psychophysiological Research in Atlanta, Georgia in 1994. So it wasn't that long ago. This has not been around for a long time. And if you've ever tried to have a conversation with Dr. Porges or listen to some of Dr. Porges's classes, it's difficult. He had never intended this theory to be for therapists. And so he's, found somebody that's doing a really good job of translating it for him. Her name is Deb Dana, and we'll talk about her in a minute. But anyway, the paradox here is Stephen Porges has brought us an understanding of the autonomic nervous system, not about balancing that autonomic nervous system, but predicting its hierarchy, predicting the states, understanding the state that your client is before you understand the story. When we talk about trauma therapy, we talk about stabilization, we talk about the narrative, and then we talk about integrating the two. Those are the three. That's the triphasic model that comes out of Judith Herman and Pierre Genet. But here it's about the state, and we want to know what state the client is in. And then we tell a story about the state, and we're not touching the trauma. We're just looking at the state shifts. So predictable hierarchy, and that we can create maps and pull information from our clients that then will assist us with being able to predict what that client's state shifts are going to look like. So how can the polyvagal theory assist us as therapists? Well, we're mapping the territory of the autonomic nervous system. When we talk about having a clinical landscape of the client before we start working, this is a clinical landscape. I call this looking at our client from a polyvagal perspective, and it is something I do in my first couple sessions, just along with everything else that I'm doing, like the DES and the intake and other stabilization skills that we work on. And it gives us an understanding of how our body reacts according to evolution, because you've got these evolutionary, this evolutionary hierarchy that we're going to talk about that also fits in nicely with giving us an understanding of what state the client is experiencing and why. The polyvagal theory helps us give a story to our state of being. So we call that state to story. And you're going to see that throughout the PowerPoint. You'll see that throughout especially Stephen Porges's books or his presentations, in that it's about identifying the state, and then it's about creating the story. And then last but not least, are we in connection or protection? And this is a really important concept also, because if we're in connection, then we're right where we need to be in order to do the work that we're going to be wanting to do with our therapists. But if we're in protection, it means that there's some type of danger that our autonomic nervous system is picking up on, which then means that we have adaptive behaviors that are going to be our priority. Those adaptive behaviors can be anything from what symptoms that bring our clients into our office to, maybe the client may, lie a lot or steal, or, things that don't necessarily bring them into the therapy office, but the behavior, the experience, beliefs about self, how stories show up in us somatically. This is all due to protection. And the key is it keeps us out of connection. And so that's why that state to story is really important. The autonomic nervous system is shaped by experiences, habitual responses, and patterns. If somebody were to say to me, Paula, what do you do in one sentence? And I'd say, I am going to spend my time looking for pattern recognition, because patterns come from our past. Patterns will be our future unless we go in and figure out how to change how our brain is encoded. So if I grow up with an alcoholic and I'm codependent, if you don't like that word, if I grow up with an alcoholic and I use fawn as a way to deal with my trauma, which means I'm a people pleaser, and I put people in front of my own needs. I make other people a priority. And that is something that I do in order to keep me safe as a child. That pattern is going to show up over and over and over again, including how I parent, how I am as a wife, how I am as a employee. So we're looking for pattern recognition. And then once we find those patterns, our goal is to name the pattern, to tame the pattern, and then to reframe the pattern. And we do that by knowing and understanding which state we're in. The polyvagal theory transforms the client's narrative from a documentary to a pragmatic quest for safety within an implicit bodily drive to survive. So what does that mean in English? We're digging around in the unconscious memory. We're going into what's implicit. If I automatically, we've had a lot of interesting situations where those in the public eye are hitting each other. So I'm not going to refer to the specific one. Well, the specific one I'm going to refer to is the basketball coaches. But you've got one basketball coach that felt kind of dissed because he didn't get to shake hands with another one. He went to grab him, and then the coach turned around and decked him. And he said, given where I come from, you don't touch me. So the point is that there are these adaptive behaviors that are implicitly stored that are due to safety, and they're there for safety alone, and that everything that we do is in service of survival. And so it doesn't matter what the story is. You can tell the story over and over and over again, but what we want to know is, how does your body react to it? How does your autonomic nervous system understand that story? Because that's what is going to be helpful. So how can polyvagal theory assist us therapists? In our presentation today, we're going to be talking about the 3 working principles of the autonomic nervous system. Deb Dana's book, which is a book I highly recommend that everybody get. I mean, it's the first thing they start talking about. The 3 principles really helps us have an understanding of what polyvagal theory is. Helping our clients understand their behaviors and state to story by assisting them with creating a map. We're going to get creative here. We're going to use color, and we're going to put together a map that the client can understand, that will show them, how their states work. And then honoring that every response is an action in service of survival, that every emotional reaction has history that is permanently encoded in the body and brain, the past present connections. So what is it that's bothering you? A lot of times these symptoms will be what brings our clients into our office to begin with. But to know that, and this is parts work also, that whatever the behavior is, no matter what the state shift looks like, it's all in service of survival. It's not something that we necessarily have control over, because if the autonomic nervous system has decided that we need it, then that's what we're going to be using. So looking at the 3 organizing principles of polyvagal theory, I do the best that I can to try to make it fun and easy to remember. But the first thing that we think about is that there's a hierarchy. There's a predictable hierarchy. And this is, when you do your work with window of tolerance, we learn about hyper arousal, window of tolerance, and hypo arousal. Well, this is going to be the same concept, but now we're looking at a hierarchy that has to do with evolution. And it's the evolutionary development of our species. And I can't speak a lot to that, so I'm just going to tell you what they said, and we're going to just go with it. If you want to look up how that works, that would be great. But the predictable hierarchy is, and I'm just going to read, this is where a hierarchy of response built into our autonomic nervous system and is secured in the evolutionary development of our species. So the 3 pathways in evolutionary order are, from oldest to newest, is the dorsal vagus, the sympathetic nervous system, and the ventral vagus. And you're not going to have to memorize these right away, but at some point would probably be good if you could use the language. But just to go backwards, the dorsal vagus is going to be where our life is being threatened We are in a shutdown. It's equivalent to hypo arousal when you're looking at the window of tolerance, Daniel Siegel's model. And then moving into the sympathetic nervous system is going to be a mobilization. It's going to be where there's energy, and it's going to be our fight, flight, and a freeze that involves energy. And then our newest is going to be our ventral vagal, which is our social connection. And the way that we work with this hierarchy and try to make it predictable is we do what's we call this the trauma traffic light, or you could call it the trigger traffic light if you're not a trauma therapist. But we start to use the colors of the traffic light as a way to assess what state the client's in. So once again, we've got the oldest state, the one that's been around for 500 million years. Like, I can't even wrap my brain around that. I don't even know what that means. So, but that's our life threat. That's our immobility response. When we say freeze, we're talking about a collapse with no energy. We're not talking about a freeze where you need to use your energy in order to stay still. And then the yellow is our sympathetic nervous system, and that's our fight flight. We are mobilized to protect ourselves. We're either going to run or we're going to fight, and it's about self-protection. And then the main message here, this is I'm going to die, and the message here is I'm in danger. And then our green is our safe. It's our ventral vagal, the relaxed, socially engaged, it's connection. This is where we want to be in, we want to be present. We want to be in dual attention with our therapist. We want to be in connection and present with our families, with our friends, in life in general. So the second principle is neuroception. What is it? Why is it important? Well, it's very important because neuroception is a subcortical experience happening far below the realm of conscious thought. In other words, it's unconscious. It's everything that's going on down here in our subconscious mind that we are not aware of. So if our autonomic nervous system decides to be decides to react to a very loud noise, it doesn't check in with the brain and say, hey, I got a problem here. That sounded dangerous. It reminded me of what happened when I was 7. So I'm going to shift our state to the sympathetic nervous system, and you're not going to be able to use the thinking part of your brain for right now. So just know that. None of that type of communication doesn't happen. What happens is the neuroception, which is unconscious, basically makes the decision, and your client goes into that state automatically, autonomic nervous system, automatically without any heads up whatsoever. So neuroception is an unconscious decision-making process. And it's nice because it's works nice with the word perspective. Neuroception is unconscious, but perception is conscious, and that our goals are to bring what's unconscious into conscious and what's conscious into unconscious. So it's nice how we can use that with our maps, which you'll see going forward. And then also about neuroception, it's going to be our implicit body's drive to survive. So service of survival is the name of this game, no matter what. So anytime the autonomic nervous system decides to shift into a specific state, it's because there is an implicit message that's encoded permanently in the client's brain. So whatever my childhood was like, whatever your childhood was like, whatever somebody else's childhood was like, we're all going to be encoded differently. The good news is because our brains, the plasticity, we can reconsolidate and shift maladaptively stored memories to adaptively stored memories. And that's another training that I do. But, and it's a thing, and that's fantastic. And we're so excited we have that opportunity. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about that what is implicitly encoded in our brain comes from the past, and that our autonomic nervous system is going to be constantly scanning for signs of safety, danger, life threats, any situation. And it's not going to be checking in with the brain and letting the brain know what it's doing. Okay. So I guess I'm getting ahead of myself when I say that, but it's such a relief for a client that was attacked in some way, shape, or form. And they are really upset because they didn't do anything about it. They froze, they didn't call 911, they didn't try to fight back, they didn't run. And it's because the autonomic nervous system put them into a shutdown, because the autonomic nervous system interpreted this information as we are going to die. And so going into the dorsal vagal is a shutdown. It's an immobilized state, which we'll talk about. I'm going to do the neuroception, and then I'll do the third principle, and then I'll stop and see if there's any questions that I can answer. There might be a lot of questions I can't, but we'll see. Neuroception precedes perception, right? Neuroception is that unconscious, and perception is our ability to be conscious. So as we learn what state our client is in, then we create the story around how the client got into that state. Then we can start having a perspective that will feed into what it is that we can perceive that's explicit, and connect that with what's going on implicitly. And that's basically trauma work in itself. It's past present connection. You know, if I am, once again, going back to a client that puts other people first, if I'm putting my family first and not taking care of myself, and I had to raise my family because my mother was depressed and my father was an alcoholic, that's going to be encoded in my brain. So asking that question, what happened, is used to explore and to learn about what the patterns look like, because the patterns are what's going to activate my autonomic nervous system to begin with. And so those triggers, those experiences, those behaviors, somatic experiences, all of that is tied into our past present connection. And all of that is recorded. And yes, it's recorded in our memory, which is what we usually always talk about, but it's also recorded in our autonomic nervous system. You know, in trauma therapy, we talk about a rupture repair. And when I have trainees that are working with clients that are highly anxious, I say, before we do anything, we need to have a rupture repair for the autonomic nervous system. So we're not even talking about the client. That autonomic nervous system is running on high energy all the time because there's so much anxiety and uncertainty. And how can we create a rupture repair and start a new pattern for that autonomic nervous system? And the way that you're going to do that is by looking at your client from a polyvagal perspective and doing some of the things that will start to shift the autonomic nervous system into a space where it is feeling safe and connected. The cognitive story follows the emotional state. This is, the way that I like to teach is saying the same thing over and over and over again, but in a different way. My mouth is getting really dry, so I gotta watch that. So cognitive story follows emotional state. We want to know what the state is first. We say that the story follows the state. Figure out the state and then figure out the story. And then once you've got that figured out, then we name it to tame it, and then we want to reframe it. So we want to name the state to tame it and then reframe it. So the psychoeducation here is really important for our clients. And then last but not least, the polyvagal organizing principle, the third one is co-regulation. And this is going to be where our safety and our connection is. This is where we want everybody to be. This is the green zone. This is where we're present and we're connected, and we are, our heart rate is at a resting rate for us. Usually we look at an average of around 70 beats per minute. It's our baseline, actually. When we're doing heart rate variability, and there's heart math, and there's all kinds of protocols that come out of this research, following your heart rate. There was a golf, what was it? Oh, I meant to ask my son about this. In Las Vegas, they did some kind of golf tournament where they had the announcers plugged into the players. And all they did was talk about their heart rate. It was hilarious. It was all polyvagal. They were talking about how their heart rate was racing and that they had to bring it down before they went to putt, because then they couldn't access the information they needed. And it was like, I don't watch golf. I find it boring, but I found that golf very exciting. But anyway, what the point is that co-regulation is where we want to be. And it's our third organizing principle for polyvagal. So let me just take a break here while I take a couple sips of something. This is my polyvagal mug. You guys get to guess which state this is later after we learn them. So is there any questions out there that you think I could answer?
Yeah, there's a couple so far. So the first one actually came in when you were introducing yourself and your background, and it just says, what do you consider talk therapy?
So talk therapy, I consider language, and I consider the therapist being the facilitator of the healing. And because I'm an EMDR therapist, when we do EMDR, the brain is the healer. And so, and the client and the therapist is just there to be part of and attuned to, and more of an attachment position. So maybe a little different than what other people would consider it, but it's literally language coming from what Daniel Siegel would call the left brain.
Great, thank you. And then which of Deb Dana's book would you recommend most if I were to get one right now?
If you're going to get one right now, this is your book. Absolutely.
The Polyvagal Theory
in therapy, yep. Engaging the rhythm of regulation.
Okay. And then how does neuroception affect those who have experienced medical trauma? So for those who have to freeze or be compliant, but feel threatened, despite maybe receiving treatment that would have helped them survive, how does this tie together for that population? Does this change anything?
Yeah. So how about if because what we're going to do is we're going to take these principles and now we're going to open it up to learning so that we can apply it to ourselves and to our clients. So can you just put that question on hold and we'll readdress it at the end if it's still a question?
Okay, great. And then what is the process of co-regulation with telehealth therapy?
Okay. And so co-regulation with telehealth is going to be anything that you are utilizing currently to stabilize or ground your clients. But the interesting thing is that when we create the maps, which is something you can do on telehealth as well, we're putting language to the shift as well as co-regulation. So, you know, my favorite co-regulation is doing the 3-3-3, which is everybody look around the room and find 3 rectangles, find 3 things that are blue, and then shake out 3 parts of your upper body, breath in, exhale out. And then I've got a couple other things that I do where the clients bring with them items that secure their space. And we talked about securing our space in the last presentation that I did. That would all be in line with co-regulation.
Okay, great. And then the last one is name, tame, and reframe original to your training? I love that. It has a very Dana ring to it.
So name it to tame it is Daniel Siegel. And then reframe it is basically what we're doing in Polyvagal. So the key is name it to tame it, because that calms the client. Once again, our goal to get into co-regulation. When we're in co-regulation, that's when we can access our skills. And so reframing is then helping the client understand their polyvagal story so that they know that when they froze, it wasn't because they chose not to do something. It's because their autonomic nervous system decided that they were in danger and that shutting down and collapsing was the way to deal with it. And that the client had no control whatsoever because the autonomic nervous system, which works through neuroception, which is unconscious, makes those decisions for us.
Okay, and then one more just came through. How might TMS be included in this discussion?
I'm not good. I can't answer that. Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't even thought about that. Okay, good. All right. Thank you. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
If you have a question that I can't answer, I'm just going to tell you I can't answer it, but please email it to me at emdrchicago@gmail.com and I'll get the answer for you. Okay, great. because I don't want you to just leave you there. All right, so just to review here with the 3 polyvagal organizing principles, understanding the science reduces the shame and the blame. So if our client can understand how they have these state shifts, why they have these state shifts, the things that create state shifts for them, then that is naming it to tame it. Also, so name the state to tame it. And then in service of survival, once again, our clients, you know, if you have a client that lies a lot, yeah, I get this question quite a bit actually. You know, what do we do if our client's lying to us? It's just like any other behavior. It's in service of survival. It is an adaptive survival response. And it is part of a survival story. And so it is an adaptive behavior that is encoded and is a part of how the autonomic nervous system protects you. And so the more psychoeducation that we can give around that, the better. I am a substance abuse therapist by trade. I don't know anyway. And, you know, I'm always telling my clients, I do a lot of 12-step work, and I'm always telling my clients, you know, sober stands for son of a bitch, emotions are real. And the client sits there to think about it. And I say, and we're going to use EMDR to deal with the real. And they're sitting there thinking about it. So in other words, we're going to start working with our emotions. And it's completely understandable that when you drink, you're not dealing with your emotions. And that was the adaptive behavior that you found at some point in your life to assist you to survive. So once again, that's just maybe a very small story, but we want to create for the client an understanding of their past, present connections. We want them to understand how their behaviors have kept them safe. And we want to understand what state they're in when they're happening. So then we can start working on changing it. So what would we want to do next? The 3 principles of polyvagal. Yes, we talked about them. And yes, you can get Deb Dana's book and she will talk about them. But we have even more, we have a fun thing you can do. This is Seth Porges. This is Dr. Stephen Porges' son. And he does a 30-minute video on the polyvagal theory. That is I think it's absolutely charming. He talks about the 3 principles. He gives really good examples. He helps with the vocabulary. Dr. Porges and Seth are together writing a book right now because he's like, Dad, like nobody understands what you're talking about. And then Stephen's like, well, help me. And I like emailing them. So anyway, and so Seth is known in his world of reporting, and he's a comedian, but I'm just curious if this will play for a couple of minutes. Let's just for a minute or two.
The polyvagal theory is a new understanding for how the entire nervous system works. And with that, it gives us incredible implications for how to control your body, your brain, other people's bodies, their brains in ways that might seem impossible, as well as lends specifics to concepts that might have been left to the abstract, things like trauma. So let's just begin here. What is the autonomic nervous system? The autonomic nervous system is the automatic nervous system. This is the part of your body you don't consciously control. It's your heart, it's your breathing, it's your digestion, it's your spleen. You don't think to yourself, Seth, I want my heart to beat. It just beats on your own. Otherwise, you would never be able to sleep at night. So traditionally, the autonomic nervous system has been divided between these 2 halves that are kind of viewed as in conflict with each other. At any given point, you're Bruce Banner or you're the Hulk. You're either in your parasympathetic mode, that's your social mode, you're resting, you're relaxing, you're eating, or you're in your Hulk mode, your fight or flight mode, your fighting mode. The sympathetic nervous system is often called of course, the fight or flight mode. But I'm here to blow that all up and tell you that that's completely wrong.
Okay, so anyway, it's charming and it's 30 minutes. It is, let me just put that back. Hold on one second. It is, oh shoot, it won't give me thought it was gonna, it's on my website. And it's on, it says find it at emdrchicago.com. tab resource, and then under the tab Polyvagal Theory. I have my clients watch it. I'm meeting with a client this afternoon who's got some pretty significant stuff going on. And I said, I need you to watch this video first because we are going to do a polyvagal map. And this is just a great way for our clients to start picking up the language of the green zone, yellow zone, red zone. That was actually introduced by Seth, the trigger traffic light or the trauma traffic light, however you want to call it. And so not only is it great for you to watch, but it's also great for our clients to watch. Okay, so, and then know that Seth and Stephen are doing something together, and we look forward to seeing what that is. So what is the autonomic nervous system? Well, first of all, a great way to share this with our clients is that it's automatic. That the functions that we don't consciously control, things like heart rate, breathing, digestion, and then it is divided into two main branches. So this is not something I'm going to go over with my clients, but I'm going to go over with you so that you understand where the different zones come from. But I think they do a fine job of doing that in the video so that you don't have to get into it in too much detail. But at the end of the day, we're looking for the three different pathways that are then going to be in service of survival. The three pathways are broken down into two paths or two sections. One is the sympathetic branch, and the sympathetic branch is found, if you were to put, this is harder for me, but it used to be easier. If you put your hand over your head and touch your back, and then you take your other hand and put it behind you and touch your back, there's a space between the fingers around your shoulders that go down to your mid back. That's where the sympathetic branch is. It's entwined and located in that part of your back. And then we've got the parasympathetic branches, which are two pathways. This is where the word vagus comes in. Vagus means in Latin, wanderer. And it basically starts at your brainstem. So if you put your hand on your brainstem, and it's it wanders, it travels in two directions. It travels down through your lungs, your heart, your diaphragm, and into your stomach. And then the other path is it starts at your brainstem and it moves up into affecting your neck, your throat, your eyes, and your ears. So that is about as scientific as I'm going to get. There is a visual that comes up in a few minutes that helps a little bit with that. But our clients' symptoms interrupt the opportunity to exercise the neural circuitry of connection. So, for example, if you have the client that's considered in their co-regulation, that they are present, and all of a sudden they hear, would be a good example, they hear their dog growling, and all of a sudden that will interrupt and they'll become alert, and they will immediately move from their ventral vagal to their sympathetic state. And so we want the client to start to understand what it is that's moving them from one state to the next. At the end of the day, these symptoms are always coming from a root cause. And so we want to identify the root cause. We want to identify the patterns of connection that then also end up being the patterns of protection. So what, we go back to that question, are you in connection or are you in protection? And it's one or the other. The protection is going to be our green state, and I'm sorry, the connection is going to be your green state, and the protection is going to be your yellow and your red. And we'll see how that works because I'm going to pull up visuals for that in a minute. We want to know if our adaptive survival responses are replacing those social engagements. What are my adaptive survival responses? We can use BASC to investigate that. What are my behaviors? When we do our polyvagal map, we're going to literally start listing, what is it? What types of adaptive strategies do I have? Am I known to lie or to drink or to, do I check out on Netflix? or, do I yell a lot, or do I go and hide and don't avoid conflict? These are going to be the behaviors that we're going to identify. We're going to be able to call them adaptive survival responses. And we're going to start putting this information together so that we can map our own autonomic nervous system. As we're doing this with the psychoeducation, it is going to reduce the client's blame and shame on self. And then, is co-regulation available, or is it unavailable? Is it dangerous? For some of our clients, being present is not an option. And I'll get clients that will start telling me that, they're in their red zone, they're in their yellow zone, but they don't go into their green zone. A lot of times when our clients are in their fight, flight, or in some type of shutdown, their co-regulation or their ability to co-regulate goes completely offline. And then somebody was asking, well, how do we get to co-regulation? Are the strategies that we're using, are they effective, or are they inadequate? So it's very similar to some of the tools that we were using in the last presentation of figuring out how to get our client into dual attention, how to have our client present with us in the room. Well, now we're looking at the states, because maybe the client has no control over that. And if we start mapping out their autonomic nervous system, this is what's going to give the client control over their state shifts. And it's also going to give language for you and your client to share around the goals of being able to state shift. The trauma response is not, I remember this slide. This is Vanderkolk. The trauma response is not a cortical deficit in understanding. So in other words, this is not something that your client should be able to predict, control, or maybe even talk about. The difficulty with perception and regulation is that it comes from the activity of deep brain structures and the autonomic nervous system. So this is just a quote that was pulled. It was also in Deb Dana's book. And it's basically, or actually maybe it came from Seth Porges. It actually just talking about how this is not something that's in our conscious awareness. It is deep and it is buried. And so our goal is to find it and to put language to it. Compromised ability to regulate states of activation. This is going to be examples of how our clients respond to their inability to control their shifts. So clients that are like, I'm often triggered, but I can't seem to control myself. What's wrong with me? What did I do? I keep trying to be okay on my own, and I don't need anybody. So wanting to isolate. I'm desperate for connection. I have to be in a relationship. So being in co-regulation may not necessarily mean that the client's is present, because they may be in their sympathetic nervous system because they are constantly on alert if the person is going to leave or not. I have to be in control to be safe. Being seen is dangerous, so I try to be invisible. I feel stuck and fighting doesn't help. I feel hopeless and helpless. Feeling good is dangerous, and I'm not safe. My wants and needs are the problems, so I shut them off quickly. My inability to connect makes me think I'm defective. I don't belong. I don't matter. So these are just examples of how the client's autonomic state is making them feel that they're responsible, that it plays into them thinking, defining who they are. It's very similar to the beliefs that our clients feel about themselves, that I'm inadequate, or that I'm defective, or that I'm invisible and unimportant, or that I'm not safe, or that I don't deserve to exist, or that I'm vulnerable. All of these beliefs that they're living in and is circulating for them in their neural networks are sometimes stuck because of their inability to understand their state shifts. If a client comes in and talks about anger management issues, how they're experiencing rage outbursts, and that then there's no memory. We've got a client that goes into one state, and then once that state is too intense, then drops into another state. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to see all of that and how that works. Just a minute. So this is kind of the predictable hierarchy is something that I don't really know much about. When somebody tells me that this is a state that we were able to access 500 million years ago, yeah, that's what it says. And I don't really know what that means. I mean, but evolutionary development of our species, the first state, the oldest state, is going to be what we call the dorsal vagal state. And it is the primitive vagus. It is the parasympathetic branch. And the most important aspect of this, and this is going to be our red zone as we start applying colors, this is the immobilized response. So when Dr. Porges did his triggering his client and was watching the clients come down to resting rate, and then you had the traumatized client that kept going past the resting rate, what they were experiencing here was an immobilized response, where the client is literally going to disappear, shut down. This is where dissociation is. This is where there's androgynous opiates that are released so that it's numbing. It's a very comfortable place to be. It's just that when you're there, it's hard to access your prefrontal cortex. It's hard to engage. And you definitely, when you're in a therapist's office, if you're in this state, it's hard to get anything done. And with EMDR therapy, it's dangerous. And so that's why we make such a big deal about it. And then the next layer in evolution is going to be what we call the sympathetic branch. This is going to be our yellow zone. And this is all about mobilization. This is all about movement. This is when the heart rate is above 100 beats per minute. When our heart rate is 110 beats per minute-ish, our amygdala hijacked. That's the language I like to use. You cannot access your prefrontal cortex. When I get clients that come in, I work with a lot of adolescents, and they come from a higher level of care. They come from Compass, they come from Insight. They have all these great tools. But if their heart rate is at 110 beats per minute, they can't access those tools. And so to teach them by introducing the polyvagal perspective, for them to understand that, oh, I need to get my heart rate down so that then I shift into a state where I can then access the tools that I've just spent the last 6 weeks learning, is a lot more helpful than having them go back and start smoking weed again, because they just did the exact same thing they did 6 weeks before treatment. So this is going to be our mobilization, our sympathetic branch. And this is when we say freeze, it's not a freeze with no energy. It's a freeze with energy. So everything in the sympathetic branch is all about the heart rate being up and the blood pressure being up. And then the newest part of our autonomic nervous system is the ventral vagus. And that is our window of tolerance. That is kind of what brought us to this whole presentation. When we were in our presentation last time, and the time before that, and the time before that, we were looking at Daniel Siegel's window of tolerance. And so we had this nice window there that we want to make sure our clients are in. And then we had hyperarousal and we had hypoarousal. But now what we're looking at is we're going to be looking at the window of tolerance being at the top. And then we're going to look at our hyperarousal, which is going to be our sympathetic nervous system, and our hypoarousal, which is going to be our dorsal vagal zone. And the reason why we're changing the order now is because you drop from being co-regulated into fight, flight, immobilized energy first. You don't go into a hypoaroused state from co-regulation. You have to be immobilized first. And then when the danger doesn't go away, that's when you go into, I'm going to die, heart rate drops, blood pressure drops, and there's no movement whatsoever. You're immobilized. And so what we're doing is we're going to be taking the window of tolerance and we're going to be shifting it around a little bit so that we can give it language so that we can teach our clients and map out how they can shift from being in co-regulated into sympathetic fight flight and going back into co-regulated, so that we don't go into a shutdown that's immobilized and dissociative. Okay. So this is the last slide on just once again honoring the evolution here. We've got the immobilized state as the oldest. Like I said, they said it's 500 million years old. We've got our mobilized state, which is our fight flight, which is our second oldest. It's 250 million years old. And then our newest, and I don't even have a number on that. And like I said, these numbers don't really, I've never studied this. And so it doesn't, and I don't have amphibians, and I don't really understand the reptile brain to the extent of how it works for reptiles. I just understand how it works for my clients. So, but this is a big part of the theory. And so I just want to make sure that I was honoring that. So we're going to look at where to start. And our foundational starting point is going to be to create a profile map. And how are we going to do that? One of the things that I want to make sure that we do with you is that everybody here is going to do a little bit of their own profile mapping. And right now you're probably thinking, I have absolutely no idea what that looks like. This has just been a lot of words on slides, but I'm going to now create visuals and very easy steps so that not only can you get an idea of your own map, but that you can leave this presentation being able to work with your clients on creating their maps and then being able to use them in session right away. So what are we going to learn? And we're going to learn where you're going to create a map, a personal profile map for you or your client. And you're going to be able to answer questions like where you are on the map. What do you know about your 3 states? What experience and patterns shape your autonomic nervous system? And then using this roadmap as, you know, more information around the client's clinical landscape, which now involves understanding their nervous system and how the nervous system and the brain react. So remember, we do a lot of work with the brain, but not necessarily the heart. And so this is the heart piece. So this is what an autonomic ladder looks like. So the Deb Dana's got in the back of her book a lot of these ladders. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show them, but a lot of these ladders. And part of the PowerPoint, I've got some blanks. Yes, here we go. A lot of ideas in the back of the book on what we can do with our ladders. But the very first ladder that you want to do is the autonomic ladder. So let's translate our basic knowledge that we know about ourselves and the autonomic nervous system into an everyday understanding by imagining us being on a ladder. If you have clients that are scared of ladders, then you're just going to want to put it on its side. How do you experience change as we move up and down the ladder? So let's talk about what that looks like. We're going to use our trauma traffic light. This slide and this slide are very helpful. We're going to talk about red being that life-threatening zone, that immobilized state, that I'm going to die, because that is the message that the body is getting. And this is the reason why one would collapse. It's the turtle that hides in the shell. It's the lizard that pretends that it's dead. It is dissociative. There are opiates released, so it is numbing. It is comfortable. It is everything that we talked about in the last 2 presentations. It is derealization, depersonalization. It is time loss and amnesia and ego states. All of that is in our red zone. And so, you know, you guys have the DES, the dissociative experiences scale that we've worked on in the last 2 presentations, 3 hours to be exact, of how to work in the red zone with our clients. So you guys should know the red zone like the back of your hand. The yellow zone is going to be our fight flight. That's going to be where our heart rate is up. Here, our heart rate is below resting. And this is where our heart rate is above resting. And our heart rate is in a place where we cannot access our problem-solving strategies, that our goal is to survive. We are in a fight or a flight, and we are preparing ourselves for that. So you have a lot of things going on in your body, like cortisol and adrenaline that's being released, and your eyes are dilating in a certain way, and the blood is being pumped to your larger muscles. And so there's a lot going on. And the goal is to deal with the danger. And so, you know, I'm not going to get into the conversation of ADHD, but we have a lot of kiddos in school that are having trouble focusing because their external environment is scary to them and they can't focus. And if we want to call it ADHD, and we can give them a medication and it helps them focus, you know, I'm not going to comment either way, but trauma-informed social workers. In fact, I just got reached out by Evanston Township. They want us to go in and do some work with the teachers and the social workers there. Being trauma-informed is really important because there's a really good chance that it's the lack of safety in our external environment that is making it hard for our students to focus. And a polyvagal ladder for a 6-year-old, not a 6-year-old, but maybe an 8 or a 10-year-old can be lots of fun because you get to do we do polyvagal show and tell, lot of great things that you can do. I had my adolescent do a polyvagal playlist. He had a lot of Eminem and a lot of rappers in his yellow, and so it was cool. John Mayer was in the green. Yeah, it's creative. Anyway, so here we have the chart. Now this chart's also on my website with the video because this is what I would have replaced my window of tolerance chart to, because I want to look at my client from a polyvagal perspective. And so we have the green, which is the social engagement. Just to look at some of the language, we have calmness and connection. We have settled, grounded. This is where our 8 C's come in from internal family systems, where we're curious and we're compassionate and we're confident and we're courageous and we're calm and we have clarity. And I always forget 1 or 2 of them, but creativity, connection. How could I forget that? Being mindful, present. The cornerstone of our work is dual attention. We want to be in the green zone. And here we've just got some what's going on in the nervous system, what's going on physically for us in our body on the right. When we move into yellow, this is my yellow mug, and we move into where our heart rate is increasing because we're triggered by something, or there's some type of external threat, which a lot of us have been experiencing for a long time now. We can give it all kinds of language: panic, fear, anxiety, worry, rage, anger, irritation, frustration, and the list goes on. I highly recommend using the intensity of emotion sheet. You can just Google it. I'll have it later on in the presentation. But to give language to what the fight flight looks like, I know for my flight, you know, I've got words like irate, outraged, enraged, furious, annoyed, frustrated. I'll even throw in, you know, some shame and feeling worthless. And then when we go into the freeze state, so imagine the heart rate's up here, you're in your fight flight, and then all of a sudden the heart rate starts to crash and it goes past resting and it goes below resting. And you have a heart rate that's, let's say, 50 beats per minute. First of all, your client gets dizzy. Your client could pass out. We all have clients that pass out. I have a client that checks her heart rate, and she's a teacher, and her rate range is 112 to 45. So I know that that client is in the sympathetic nervous system and in her dorsal vagal in one day, as well as being in social engagement. And so she's working on being able to identify when it is. And so she knows that she's in dorsal vagal when she walks down the halls, because she's terrified when she walks down the halls, because there's so many kids everywhere. And where she works, the kids are just not doing so great. So, okay. So anyway, this is our chart that we use that starts to give us language. And when we're doing our polyvagal map, this is a great way to help our clients and help ourselves start to distinguish and answer questions around what state we're in. We're going to be using the traffic light. Seth Porges uses the traffic light in his video. It makes for a nice transition to the clients doing their autonomic ladders. And so the red light is the dorsal vagal. It is, I'm going to die. So I like to, we need to memorize. We've got dorsal vagal, we've got sympathetic, and we have ventral vagal. So you think of words that help you with remembering which is which. I use dorsal vagal. I'm going to die. I want to disappear. I want to dissolve. I'm diminished. So that's how I remember that it's dorsal vagal, if you need to memorize them. But anyway, I am going to die. I'm far away in a dark and forbidding place. I make no sound. I'm small, silent, barely breathing, alone, where no one will find me. And I have a client that had to do that every time her father came home from work. She would go and hide under the table, and she needed to be invisible so that she would not get hurt. This is our oldest pathway of response, the dorsal vagal pathway of this parasympathetic branch. It is the path of last resort. It is the, I'm not in danger anymore. That danger is, there's nothing I can do about it. It's really the system has given up. And so when all else fails, when we are trapped and action isn't working, this is the primitive vagus. This is the 500 million year old. Once again, not real sure what that means, but it takes us into shutdown, collapse, and dissociation. And once again, when we talked about dissociation part 1 and dissociation part 2, we were spending our time figuring out how to get our clients out of the dorsal vagal parasympathetic. And when we do a DES, the dissociative experiences scale, and the score is above a 20-ish, we have a client that spends time in this zone, and we want to map that out and give the client language. Here at the very bottom of the autonomic ladder, I'm alone with my despair, escape into not knowing. I'm foggy, I'm tired, too tired to think or act. The world is empty, dead, and dark. And then from this earliest place, let's see here, sorry, I just wanted to read the bottom, and this thing is blocking me. From the earliest place on the evolutionary timeline where my mind and body have moved into conservation mode, I may believe I'm lost and no one will ever find me. And that is the case when we are, especially when we're younger. So that's our red zone. Then we have our yellow, our sympathetic nervous system. This is going to be a high heart rate. So when you think about that chart that we had, it tells you specifically where the heart rate is, what your blood pressure is doing, what your digestive system is doing. You have cortisol and adrenaline pumping into your system here. Your heart is pounding because it's moving blood to the bigger muscles. Let's see here. The fight or flight system, feeling uneasy, overwhelmed, want to move, take action, escape. No one can be trusted. No place is safe. This is the branch of the sympathetic. This is that behind the back. And it's separate from the parasympathetic branch. And it is when we are amygdala hijacked, when something triggers, and it is going to be neuroception. You're going to have no idea that it happened. And your body, your central nervous or your autonomic nervous system is picking up on danger. You go into action, fight, flight. Your heart rate speeds up, your breath is short and shallow. We scan our environment looking for danger. We are on the move. So this is where, and then one might describe themselves as anxious or angry and feel the rush of adrenaline that makes it hard for them to be still. It takes 20 minutes for our body to readjust into the green zone when you are in a full fight flight, because of the adrenaline and the cortisol and whatever else is being released and all the shifts and changes that are going on in your body. And this is, the state that you go into when you want to either, run away or take something on. And then if this danger doesn't leave, If it doesn't go anywhere, so during the pandemic, we were waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and people started to get really lethargic. We were doing what we could, but there was no answers. There was nothing that was encouraging. And that took us into I'm sorry, I meant to go this way. That took us into the red zone. So we see people shifting from red to yellow, red to yellow, red to yellow. And red is literally the I'm giving up. And then last but not least, and we always work with this last, is the social engagement system. What I would feel if I was safe, warm, connected. My heart rate is regulated. This is going to be our resting rate. Our breath is full. Our muscles are relaxed. We're looking at, eye contact. We're looking at facial muscles, voice prosody and intonation, all of the pieces that Daniel Siegel talks about when he's sharing that 85% of our communication is nonverbal. Safety and connection are guided by the Evolutionary's newest part of the autonomic nervous system. And this is our ventral vagal. So our ventral state. So you've got up here your dorsal state, you've got your sympathetic state, and you've got your ventral state. And you don't necessarily have to memorize those for your clients. You just have your red zone, your yellow zone, and your green zone. And like I said, when you watch Seth Porges's video, you will get, the client will be able to start using that language. Okay, I'm going to read you a couple stories that start showing the shifting up and down the ladder. I want to make sure I'm good on time. It's really hard to figure out how to time this. Okay, so I'm just going to read. So now that we've explored each of the places on the autonomic ladder, let's consider how we move up and down. So our preferred place is at the top of the ladder. Now, the stoplight goes red, yellow, green. But when we do our ladder work, we put green on top because we think of the client falling into a dissociation as opposed to falling into a co-regulated, safe, connected place. So we have the green on the top. So we, our preferred place is the top of the ladder. She makes this connection with this song that I can see clearly now. The ventral vagal state is this hopeful and resourceful state that's full of connection and presence and where our dual attention is. It is a place where we have ability to acknowledge distress and explore options because we have access to our prefrontal cortex. But as we move down the ladder into action, when we are triggered, that's our autonomic nervous system, sensing danger, and we have the sense of unease, we move into our sympathetic state, which is now a state of impending danger. So our heart rate is up. Like I said, our amygdala hijacked. We can't access our thinking brain. And we're going to be in that state. And we stay in that state until something happens that either removes the danger or in some way, shape, or form, we can state shift ourselves. And if it doesn't happen, then we fall way down to the bottom rungs, which is going to be where our dorsal vagal red zone is. So I'm going to read you two stories to give you examples. We identify the states and then we give it a story. We're going to do it backwards here just so you can see the shifts. So I'm driving to work in the morning, listening to the radio and enjoying the beginning of my day. I'm at the top of my ladder when a siren sounds behind me. Quickly, I'm triggered and I move down the ladder. I feel my heart racing and immediately worrying that I've done something wrong. So not only is the client being triggered by the siren, but then the past present channels of association are acting up where she feels like she did something wrong. I pull over and the police car rushes by me. I pull back out, resume my drive to work, and feel my heart begin to return to its normal speed. So then the client moves back up the ladder. And by the time I get to work, I've forgotten about the incident and am ready for my day. Go back up, stay at the top of the ladder. So this is an example of what we would like for our clients to be able to do. We'd like for them to identify when they're in their green zone. And then we want them also to identify the types of things that put them in their yellow zone. And then we want them to be able to track the state shift from green to yellow, back to green. So this is just a basic example. This is going to be a little bit more detailed of an example. So I'm having dinner with my friends, enjoying the conversation and the fun of being out with people I like. So I'm at the top of my ladder. The conversation turns to vacations, and I start comparing my situation to my friend's situation. I begin to feel angry that I can't afford a vacation, that my job doesn't pay it, that I have so many unpaid bills, and I'll never be able to take a vacation. And my heart rate's starting to move up, and I'm starting to move down the ladder. I sit back and watch as my friends continue to talk about trips and travel plans. I disconnect from the conversation and begin to feel invisible as the talk goes on around me and nobody notices. So I'm shutting down and I'm moving to the bottom of the ladder. The evening ends with my friends not noticing my silence. So I'm feeling abandoned and alone, and with me feeling like a misfit in the group and that I don't belong. So I'm stuck at the bottom of the ladder. So you have the client starting in connection, safety and connection, resting rate, everything's going great. And then something triggers her. It triggers her so that she moves into her sympathetic nervous system, the yellow zone. Heart rate increases. She starts getting upset. She starts getting angry. There are a lot of things that are feeding into this, and she can't get out. She's stuck. And that's a really big part of the work that we do. If you are stuck, you need a roadmap so that you can get where you need to go. So she's stuck, and now she's stuck. Nothing is changing. Her friends are ignoring her. She is feeling invisible, unimportant, not heard, and that she doesn't exist, which then is bringing her into the red zone, which is the dorsal vagal, which is where the heart rate has dropped. She's going to be lethargic. She's not going to have any energy, yellow energy, but now we're in red, and this is where she's stuck at the end of the day. She goes home and she crawls into bed. The only place I know now is the bottom of the ladder. The next morning she wakes up and she doesn't want to get out of bed and go to work. So she's still stuck at the bottom of her ladder. I worry I'll get fired if I don't show up and drag myself out of bed. So a bit of energy in beginning the movement up the ladder. And this is something that we learn and talk about. When our clients are stuck in the red zone, how do you get out? Different strategies for different clients. This is part of the map. And usually it's about heart rate, increasing your heart rate in some way, shape, or form. So having them start to move. And this is one of the things we do when, let's say I'm doing EMDR online, is I have my clients do their bilateral so that they are moving, because I don't want them to go into a red state. And so as long as they're moving, I can actually keep them out of a red state. And so whatever orientation you're using, if you want to keep your client from going into their shutdown, you just keep their heart rate going. You just keep them moving. So I'm late to work. My boss comments on my lateness, and I have a hard time holding in an angry response. So she's back in yellow, and that's good. She may be angry, but at least we've got her heart rate up where we need it to be. And you can't get to green from red unless you go through yellow. It's very important. So I decide that I've had enough of this job, and I will seriously look for a new one. Still yellow because I'm angry. I begin to consider the skills that I bring to the table, and that with the right job, I'll be able to pay my bills and maybe even take a vacation. I have lunch with a coworker, and we talk about our jobs and dream of the future. And then the client is back at the top of the ladder. So the takeaways are that the autonomic state is the filter through which you experience the world. And it's the autonomic nervous system is guided by neuroception, which is unconscious. So the stories assist with showing how she moves from state to state, and then and through, what her day looked like at that point in time. The environmental cues can magically transform your physiology and how people perceive you. And so we're talking about being able to assess our states, going from one state to the next, and knowing that you can, in fact, shift states given what your external environment is offering you. It is automatic, but you can control it if you know how. So if you know what state you're in, if you know that you're starting to go into a sympathetic state, and you know that you're starting to get angry, and you know that in order for you to get into a co-regulated state, you've mapped it out with your therapist and you know what it is that you need, then those are the, that's the things that you can start working on in between sessions. The feeling state is necessary for living a good life and bonding with others. I'm just going to kind of blow through these because I don't want to run out of time. But the feelings safe in connection is necessary for, and that is our goal in life. Bonding with others is necessary for good health. Being in connection is where the green state and co-regulation exist. When people don't feel safe, they don't think critically. And this is about critical thinking skills. It's just saying that if your client doesn't feel safe, then if they are amygdala hijacked or in their shutdown zone, they cannot access their prefrontal cortex and be critical thinkers. And then the simplest way to make people like you. This is talking about Daniel Siegel's work with 85% of our communication is body language. So we've got tone of voice, we've got facial expression, we have our posture, we have our timing around how we communicate with people. We have tone, prosody, and intonation. So there are a lot of things that we could be working on as ways to engage. DBT has this half smile that they do. And literally when you create a smile on your face, and you know, in a lot of the Korean shows, they're always like holding up the smile, it releases, I don't remember what it releases, but it's either an endorphin or a dopamine. And so like creating a smile can be part of what we can work on. But the biggest thing is that we can fix it. We can figure out how to shift into our different states, learn how to map out our autonomic nervous system. And then the mapping skills will naturally teach us the ability to start state shifting. And so I kind of want to get to where that is.
So Paula,
before we, yeah,
I don't know if, so you have several questions about the different states. Do you want to stop and answer some of those, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do that. I just wish I could see okay, good, here we are. Okay, because I just want to give everybody a chance to do it on their own too. And it looks like we've got perfect time for that. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so there's quite a few, but the first one is it advised to have the client or in therapy provide a means to measure heart rate activity?
You know, that is a really good question. I wear a Fitbit everywhere, and I know my heart rates. Wait, let me get something real quick. I have, and I showed you guys this at the last presentation. When I work with my younger clients, even some of my adult clients, this is a Purble, and it has a heart rate. And what it does is it teaches you how to calm. You need to calm the Purble, the purring gerbil down, and its heart rate starts to slow down. And so I do use heart rate with some of my clients. I'm not going to use heart rate with clients that are going to be counting, you know, if they're counting calories, or if there's an eating disorder, or if they're about how much they exercise, or even some OCD behaviors. But at the end of the day, I do think heart rate, calculating the heart rate is really important. My client whose heart rate goes to 45 when she walks down the hall of her school, I mean, that is really important data. And so that's helped us figure out what's going. She's got a lot of trauma, but it's helping us figure out where it is that she's distressed and what state she's in, and how we can start figuring out how to shift her in and out. So that's a long answer for that question. So, and it's not yes or no, but it's probably.
That's great. Okay. And this was earlier, but how do we map out the nervous system with our client in session?
We're going to do that. So that's what we're doing next. We're going to do lots of that next with our last 30 minutes.
Wonderful. And can you tell us the approximate heartbeat per minute for each zone, red, yellow, green again?
Yeah,
please?
this is approximates, but 70 is about resting, 65 to 70. We're looking at as low as, you know, my client is the lowest I've ever seen, a 45. but I would say 50 to 60 for on the low end. And then on the high end, statistically, we see at 110 is where you are officially amygdala hijacked. That's the ish number. So about 100 to 110. And I make it very clear to my clients that when your heart rate is that high, you cannot access your problem solving skills. So, you know, I get so many clients that are like, but I know that I wasn't supposed to do that. And I know you knew, but it was in a part of the brain that was shut off. You have no access to it because your central nervous system, your autonomic nervous system is about saving you right now. And that's all it's doing. It's in service of survival. And this is naming entertainment. This is half of change is acknowledgement. And this is empowering our clients with knowledge so that they don't shame and blame themselves because yeah, I just spent 6 weeks at Compass and I just did the same exact thing that I did before I left. So anyway, it helps us look at the client from a different perspective so that we can be working with them in a different way. Okay.
What about people who are constantly suicidal? To me, some of my clients who are suicidal seem to be stuck in the yellow and don't go into the red, and the yellow is unbearable.
So I might think that they're actually in red, but okay, but that doesn't matter. When I show you how to map it, you're going to find out for sure. So why don't we learn about how to map, which we're going to do next. And then let's, if you want to reach out to me with that particular client, I would be surprised if they are in yellow and suicidal because the mobilization would keep them alive. It's when they're immobilized and they think they're going to die that it's dangerous. So let's leave that question with a little asterisk next to it and see what comes up when we do the mapping.
Okay, and then there was a follow-up. Is there a difference between suicidal ideation and yellow and red?
Yes. Well, suicidal ideation is generally when a client is immobilized. They're lethargic. We're looking at depression. They're lethargic. They have no energy. They find no happiness and people, places, things that they usually are happy with. It's a part of self that is giving up. And so we usually find that in red. It's going to be I want to disappear. I don't want to exist. I should not exist. I don't deserve to exist. All of that comes from red.
Okay. And is the yellow zone where we find our EMDR targets?
Isn't that cute? Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
And so when we have our clients in red, we want to move them into yellow. They have to go into yellow to get to green. And so with EMDR, you're going to find your targets in the yellow without going to the red. So when we talk about not wanting to pick a target that's too big or overwhelming, it's because we don't want the client to go into red. And so, yes. And that's for any orientation, no matter what symptom you're looking at. If they go into red, they're not there with you to work with you. But we want to give it language. I have one client that says, I go into red all the time because opiates are heroin. It feels good and it's numbing. And this guy just goes from red to yellow, red to yellow, red to yellow. And he's like, when we first started the work, he goes, I'm never in green. And that was his language. That was his state story. And so we started to shift it by him starting to fill in and figure out what green is.
Okay. And then I think one last question for this section and we can move on.
Okay.
So what about a client who reports experiencing an eerie calm in which her smartwatch considers her asleep, although she's awake and able to interact with others? This happens to her infrequently in daily life. It also happens in therapy sessions, although she does not appear to go into fight before going into what appears like a freeze state. She reports being in her body. She doesn't think she's disassociating in any way. Any thoughts?
That is, I would have to read that again. I don't want to just not answer the question. So can you send that one to me, Dana? Just
Yes.
send it to me. And
Absolutely.
And then put the email address on it. Let me read it again because I'm not sure I got all the details. And then I will respond to that.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do a personal profile map. This is something that I want you to walk out of this training with the ability to do. You can set this up yourself, or you can You can go online, and Deb Dana has these, you can get them for free, or I think that there's a blank one that's part of the PowerPoint, so you can print it yourself. But this is the map that we're looking at. We just build this, we have 3 sections. We have the green, the yellow, the red. The green being the safe social connection, the yellow being the sympathetic. And when you see that word mobilized, you're thinking about a higher heart rate. And oops, I lost it. And then for the red, you've got your dorsal vagal immobilized, and you're going to have your client that's shut down, lethargic. I think of them under a table or in bed under the covers. So we're going to draw the ladder out on a piece of paper. And I'd like for all of you to just kind of sketch a ladder for yourself. And if you have colors, great. And if you don't, no worries. But just make yourself 3 sections, and just at the top, put safe and connection, and write the word green. And then in the middle, you're going to write mobilize, fight, flight, and the word yellow. And at the bottom, immobilized / collapsed, and red. And so for each state, we give it language. We want to give it emotions, body sensations, responses, beliefs, anything that comes up for a client. It's like a part of self. What it looks like, feels like, sounds like. Different people come up with different things. And this usually isn't hard for them. We want to look at the intensity. And then when we're done with that, we want them to answer the question, you know, when I'm in my green state, I am. And when I'm in my green state, the world is. And you're going to do that for all 3 sections. So let's see what that looks like. This is the map that I have in my office that helps me direct the client. So I have, first of all, I always have the markers out so that they can color any way they want. And then I have them find the language, that we start with the language first. And the language comes from, like, for example, the intensity of feelings chart, which is on my website. And so when we're in our, we want to start with our sympathetic. We want to start with yellow. We always go to ventral vagal last. And so we start with sympathetic, and we say, okay, when you're mobilized in fight, flight, what is some language that comes up for you? Maybe they're fine coming up with their own language, but if they need to, they can pull language from the intensity of feelings chart. I feel aggravated and annoyed and frustrated and agitated. And then when you go into your red zone, you're immobilized, collapse, you know, no energy. Then you're probably going to be over here, helpless, hopeless, beat, overwhelmed, incapable, lifeless, run down. So the point is that the client, if they can do all of this on their own, that's great. But I'm using the intensity of feelings chart a lot to help put language. I will send this home as a homework with 1 color at a time. We'll do, and I always start with yellow, and then go to red, and then go to green. Okay, we always want to do green last. And so also what's interesting about the ladder is that when you are in yellow and you drop into red, you cannot go directly to green. You have to go through yellow to get to green. And, you know, you'll see that in some of the exercises that we see. So what I'd like for you guys to do right now is I would like for you to start putting language into your green, calm, safe connection. Put some language into your mobilized fight, flight. This is where you're going to have an increased heart rate. And then put some language into your dorsal vagal red, which is going to be your shutdown, when you have no energy, when you feel numb and you are, you know, feel like you don't exist, unimportant, invisible. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute. I'm going to put this sheet back up. And so just put some language into each one. And if anybody has any questions, they can put it out to Dana while we're doing this, about this particular exercise. Dana, can you see everybody?
I cannot see people. I can just read the question and answer.
Okay, that's fine. All right. I'll just give it a few minutes. I usually have people hold their pens up and then I know they're done, but just give it a couple words so that you can have an idea. And I want you to fill in the language. Now, I want you to go to your yellow, your sympathetic, your heart rate that's racing, your fight flight, maybe your body tensing up, the I'm in danger. And I want you to fill in the sentence, the world is. So when you're in this state, the world is, and I am. And then while you're there, just give it a cue word. You know, looking at the language that you gave it. And then go down to your red, into your immobilized, collapse, lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, shut down, numbing, absence of energy, lethargic. And once again, when I'm in this state, the world is, and I am. And give that a cue word. And then go up to, last but not least, your ventral vagal. Calm, present, regulated, heart rate, security, micro moments. I can breathe, I'm connected. The world is, I am, and cue word. And so this is your professional profile map. It is the very first thing that we do. And we're giving the client the ability to start putting language to how they shift from state to state. This is an example from the book, the ventral vagal, flow, connected, warm, open-hearted, curious. I am okay. The world is welcoming and filled with opportunity. Actually, there is, looks like I cut it off there. I can't read what's on the right. And then when you're in your yellow, you're sympathetic, out of control, too much, confusing, overwhelming, angry, I am crazy, toxic, the world is unfriendly and scary and exploding. And then last but not least, when you're in that immobilized state, this particular person, dark, foggy, fuzzy, silent, numb, hopeless, I am unlovable, invisible, lost, and alone, and the world is cold, empty, and uninhibited. So this would be our personal profile map. Now, the beautiful thing about Deb Dana is that she has many maps. And so I'm just going to give you a couple examples of some of the other maps, because once you get the client to do the original map where they have a clear understanding for themselves, and they'll continue to add to it, of their personal profile map. Now what we're going to get into is triggers. What triggers the yellow in the fight flight? What are triggers for our red zone, which is that shutdown? And we don't call these states, we call these glimmers. And this is really important. When we're in our ventral vagal, we want the client to identify moments of contentment, moments of being fine, moments of being okay. That is going to be the mildest language we're going to get to. Moments of being exuberant, thrilled, cheerful, moments of being fired up, gung-ho, capable, confident. It is, she calls them glimmers. I'm not really into that word, but it is about being present for a moment. And we need our clients to start shifting to, it's not that you're happy, it's that you had a moment that made you happy. And that can be a home run in baseball, that can be a touchdown, that can be a hike when you saw a certain woodpecker, that can be, you know, a fire in your fireplace and a moment of peace, cup of coffee, you know, the tea that you drink, moments. And we want the clients to start looking at their ventral vagal as a place where they experience moments of positive, and they're going to start writing them down. And then this is the third map. Like I said, there's a lot of them. And this talks about things I can do on my own and things that I can do with others. What helps me stay in my green co-regulated safety and connection state? What helps me move out of fight flight, my yellow mobilized increased heart rate? And what helps me move out of my red zone when I am in bed, under the covers, can't move, don't want to go anywhere, don't want to do anything? What helps me move out of there alone? And what helps me move out of there with others? Once again, mapping and then putting language to. And this is where we get the state shifts. What are things? I know personally for myself, if I get on my bike, I am automatically guaranteed a state shift. So my bike's by my front door. And when this weather gets better, I will be on it a lot. There are, in Deb Dana's book, a lot of maps. Okay, like I said, you can do playlist maps, you can do art maps, you can do all kinds of maps. And then Deb Dana came out with this book because this one was so popular. And this is 50 client-centered practices. And out of that, I picked this one because I thought this one was cute. And we do different kinds of, I don't want to call them games, but exercises. And so this is one where we all wrote down our name. And we wrote, let's see, I'll check the time. We all wrote down our name, and then we were able to use our phones because this was a little harder. And we were able to look up words that applied to these different states of self and just our names. So Paula, you know, the words that came up for me were prayers, Asia, it's a long story, understanding, loving, attunement, moving into my yellow, sympathetic, my increased heart rate. When people placate, it annoys me. This is an undesirable state for me. I think of it being loud, I get agitated. And then going into the red, the shutdown, paralyzing, alcohol, unfeelingness, I looked it up, it is a word, lifelessness, and apathetic. Anyway, I can't pronounce it, but I did look it up. So here is just one, like I said, of 50 options. And these are the books. This is Deb Dana's original book that she wrote. She basically is the translator for Seth Porges. Then she came out with the flip chart. I don't recommend this. This is not only is it not made well, but maybe for other people, they got a better copy of it. Mine is warped and I'm not really sure why. And then this book is priceless with all the different ways that we can use these exercises to not only assist, but to help shift our clients from one state to a next. And so we're very grateful to Deb Dana and Seth Porges. They have a lovely relationship, which you can see you can find a lot of things on YouTube. So your learning objectives, understanding the theory. I hope that I was able to give you an introduction. It is a complex theory, but I wanted to give you something that you could, start with. Vagal tone, heart rate. This is us studying the heart as opposed to the brain. Understanding our state, then understanding our story. Exploring our autonomic responses, patterns, and once again, state to story. Giving your state shifts a narrative. Naming it to tame it. Helping the client with reduction in shame and blame because they can understand that the autonomic nervous system is the boss and that it makes decisions regardless of the client's acknowledgement. And that half of change is acknowledgement. We want to work with those state shifts and empowering our client with knowledge, an understanding of what the 3 states are and how they work and what it is that puts them personally, what their personal map looks like. So once again, to then help them not be in that shame and blame. And then working with the states like you would with parts. Always looking for those 8 C's, learning to be compassionate about the states. We go into a red state of dissociation, and that's helpful for us because we needed it at one point in time. So to be able to be compassionate, consider it curious, learn to connect with the states, and then talking about how confidence and courage, creativity, and calmness can come from these states. And it looks like that is the end, which I do a really good job of ending right on the moment, but it doesn't give us a lot of questions. So I hope, you guys, that this was worth your time. I feel very passionate about polyvagal. And so if anything comes up, let me know. Dana, is there any final thoughts, questions?
So Paula, there are so many questions coming in. So I would say if you guys, if you have those questions, especially the more specific detail-oriented ones, feel free to email Paula and she will, I don't want to inundate you, Paula, but I think you're very open and welcoming of these emails.
I am, and I never give enough time for questions, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm very specific about getting through my whole PowerPoint.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot about states. There was a really good one. I'm trying now. It's tricky to go back through. There was one about kind of our parallel. Here we go. Are there any resources we can check out on how our vagal systems as therapists are impacted during our work with clients? I'm thinking a parallel process.
Absolutely. You should all do your own maps. The maps that we saw, those were all of them, except for the one in the book, are my maps. I do maps on myself all the time. And you can do it specific to your sessions with your clients. What shifts? What are the triggers? They're very specific triggers for me: knives, blood, body parts. I know what my triggers are, and I know when I'm dissociative. I dissociated just last week when somebody said something and I added it to my map. So yes, it's a good question.
Okay. Yeah. And then you briefly mentioned substance use. Is this client's attempt to cope with yellow zone?
Yes, exactly. So substance use and any type of addiction puts us in red. And so to be able to give our clients language around that, when you're in red, you're numb, you're not feeling, you don't need to deal. And this is, and then being able to find like a story around, when did you first drink and how did that make you feel? So being able to take the shame out of it and, like I said, create a narrative.
Okay, where would mania fall in the ladder? How would we name, tame, reframe manic episodes? Does polyvagal work for symptoms like mania or psychosis?
Well, yes. And so you're going to be looking at the yellow zone, and that's going to be your mobilization, because with mania, we're mobilized. And so giving it polyvagal language, that doesn't mean that you're not going to do parts work with the mania part and do some of your other, incorporate some of your other orientations. But I find parts work is amazing with bipolar, but also state shifts are very important. So integrate it.
Wonderful. Okay, and the questions just keep coming in, so feel free to email Paula or even myself, and we can direct you point you in the right direction for answers. Because I don't think we're going to get to all of these, but everyone is saying thank you so much. Such a wonderful presentation. And as always, Paula, we're excited to have you with us.
Oh, thank you. I have one last thing to say. I read the evaluations, and I read the evaluations for the last one because I want to be good at this, and I value what you say. There was one and using it to diagnose people, and I want to make sure that it was that I wish I had made this very clear. We do not use the DES for diagnosis at all. We only use it for screening. So I just wanted to throw that on there, tail end of the last presentation that I did. And I appreciate that person pointed that out. So, okay, are we good?
All right, thank you. And thank you all for the questions. I think that makes such a wonderful presentation and discussion. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Wednesday.
Yay.